Sego, Zegwego, and welcome to Onkwariwa'sho. We're happy to share with you news and updates from the St. Regis Mohawk tribe. We are pleased to report on all the work that is being done to help build a better tomorrow. I'm your host, Brendan White. In this episode, we speak with Tribal Chiefs Beverly Cook and Eric Thompson regarding a medical delegation that just returned from Cuba. They share with us a medical treatment that is helping patients deal with diabetic ulcers. Let's take a look. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Now, my understanding is that a medical delegation recently traveled to Cuba to look at a new treatment that's available for patients suffering from diabetic ulcers. Now, why is diabetes of concern for the St. Regis Mohawk tribe?
We have very high prevalence rates here in Onkwariwa'sho, not only here, but the whole south and eastern portion of the United States. For some reason, our diabetes prevalence rates are much higher than other Indian communities across the country. In Onkwariwa'sho, though, we have about an 18% prevalence rate here, whereas New York State has 9%. So, or 6%, I'm sorry. So we're three times higher prevalence rate here in Onkwariwa'sho than the rest of the state. So as a result, we see the complications of diabetes more frequently than other communities do. As of late, we've had a very excellent wound care team established at our chronic care program at the clinic. Not all communities are so fortunate to have that. And it's also very time intensive. So looking into a medication that could accelerate the healing of diabetic wounds and to prevent subsequent amputations was the key focus.
What led you to go to Cuba?
We had heard about a medication called Hepropro-P. It's relatively new, maybe 4 or 5 years old, I think. It could be a little bit older than that. But it's presently being marketed to 30 countries around the world, except for the United States and Canada hasn't approved it, largely in part because of the embargo that's been in place for decades over Cuba. So we haven't had access to it. We just heard about it maybe 1 or 2 years ago. The effort to research it and have people go and investigate, what the possibilities were for acquiring this medication were actually proposed to a larger organization last year, and they did nothing with it. So being a little bit impatient about it, we thought that we would, if the chance came about, that we would investigate it ourselves.
And how did that chance come about? What were the steps for this delegation to be assembled?
We went to, I think it was an NCAI meeting in Washington, D.C., and there's a gentleman named Jose Pereiro, who's the Assistant Director of Research at the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian, who is actually from Cuba. He had ties with the ambassador to the United States from Cuba, discussed, public affairs with him, and the medication came up in their conversation. Also, the fact that there's lung cancer treatments that are undergoing clinical trials presently at Roswell. So we were asked if we would be interested in visiting with the ambassador and, inquiring about the medication. And so we took him up on that offer and visited him in December of 2015. And about 5 or 6 weeks later, surprisingly, we received an invitation from the ambassador and the Minister of Health in Cuba for us to come and visit and to see their research facilities, to speak with them more extensively about the medication and so on. And so we took them up on the offer, and that's how we ended up going. We formed the delegation. Our health director went with us. One of the physicians from the health services clinic came with us. Jose himself, and Gudgy Cook also accompanied us as a representative of the Novo Foundation. And we also took Allison Doctor, who's a consultant with the tribe and with health services, and is also a communication specialist, to come and witness and help us design, our communications when we returned home.
Excellent. And what were some of the facilities that you visited while in Cuba?
There was a litany of facilities that we visited. I think there was really what we were given a tour of the model of their healthcare system. So we began in the ministry, meeting the minister of health and having a meet and greet and an explanation of what their system looked like, and then we proceeded to get a tour of the model, physically visiting their clinics, their polyclinics, the research facilities that develop their medicines, and their hospital units. So there was a total of, was it 14?
I think it ended up being 12 facilities that we visited.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, per capita, Cuba, it leads the world as one of the countries in producing physicians. Why is that?
They, when the embargo hit, they had to turn their attention to the health and welfare of their community, because they had nothing coming in. Community, I mean their island population. So they put much of their resources into medical care, research, and prevention.
Onkwariwa'sho.
At Milani's, we're really proud of our Cub Cadet mowers. They make very dependable, very durable mower. They've got 62 models of lawn mowers. If you're mowing a half an acre or 10 acres, we got a machine that'll do exactly what you need it to do. You can get the zero turns with the steering wheel or the lap bar. We've got a 1969 Cub Lowboy outside that really speaks to the durability and dependability of Cub Cadet. They're an American company made in the United States, and we're really happy to have them as our primary lawn and garden equipment.
Hi, Everett from Furniture Weekend. My wife Kathy and I are wondering, since it's cold outside and you're spending more time inside, are you noticing that your sofa's worn out, your mattress has a sag, or your recliner needs replacing? See us for all your furniture needs. From rustic to contemporary, we've got it. Furniture Weekend, 44 Duane Street, Malone, open 10 to 5, Friday through Sunday, or by chance or appointment. And remember, at Furniture Weekend, we open less, so you pay less.
Due to the embargo, has that resulted in Cuba looking at alternative forms of treatment?
I think that, getting to the other question, the fact that they have an emphasis or a focus on the medical area, stems from the fact that after the revolution, the majority of their physicians left the country. Mm-hmm. And I think that 2 out of 5 or 3 out of 5 left the country, so they had to rebuild that. And the model that they chose to focus on is the educational model of producing these physicians, and I think they laid the foundation for that and built on that with regards to R&D, research and development of different medicines that would help their own population and then the world at large. And I think that their emphasis and the time and effort that they put into that model is what they're looking to. After, I think, the embargo, or after the relations thaw, I think that's going to be a revenue stream, or at least a part of their economic model going forward. Because they've put so much emphasis and time and effort into that, I think that that's going to be one of their more main, one of the pillars of their economy, I think.
Now, when you talk about relations thawing, that is more for the United States. Mm-hmm. But historically, the Iroquois have had a relationship with Cuba. Could you share information on that?
Well, I think that there's a relation with regards to a delegation that went to the island after the revolution in 1959. There was a congratulatory statement that was sent out previously by the delegation was made up of Iroquois, Creeks,
Mississippi.
and Mississippi. So Iroquois, Creeks, and Mississippi. And the congratulations was sent on a deer hide skin to the island, and an acknowledgement of their revolution. This resulted in an invitation to this delegation, of which an Iroquois was represented, and that was Mad Bear Anderson. So the festivities that they were invited to was the July 25th, 1959 festivities that they had in acknowledgement of the revolution. And at that time, they met with Fidel Castro and exchanged gifts and acknowledgement. So that was the beginning of this relationship. That the thread that runs through it, or a direct corollary to that visit, was the fact that in the 70s, in the late 70s, Cuba was the first nation to recognize the indigenous delegation in the UN. So that comes directly from that relationship that was established. So,
And I trust that relationship had some influence on the invitation being extended.
I think so. I think that they identify with the indigenous people of North America as a whole. For whatever reason, I think that they recognize us as being as surviving colonialism, and they for whatever reason they identify with us, and I think they want to foster that relationship. And this was, to me, I think that invitation, the invitation to the ambassador's office, and then the subsequent invitation to the island is a direct. That's a direct result of that.
Now, with the delegation, you had Michael Cook, who was the health services director. You also had Dr. Robinson. But as political leaders, what are you hoping will be the outcome of the trip?
The context that we went down there was to investigate the medication itself and how to acquire it. To also be cognizant that Hebepro-P is going to be undergoing clinical trials in the United States. It's just a matter of time. There's been, the University of Arizona is presently petitioning to conduct those clinical trials, which is going to take about 3 years and millions of dollars to complete. What we don't want is when that does become FDA approved, that we don't get lost in the shuffle. The budgets for Indian Health Service are not as well funded as we feel that they should be, especially with the United States having an obligation to provide health and welfare for the Indian people. So we want to be able to discuss these matters, being informed with larger organizations, NCAI, USET, National Indian Health Board, Tribal Leaders Diabetes Committee, and so on, to be able to advocate for Native people to have full access to this medication. Many people don't realize that the funding for Indian Health Service is even less than the funding that goes to the prisoners, to the prison system. So we're struggling and having to advocate strongly for every dime that we get in our budget, and often it doesn't get increased. So when this medication becomes available, we want to make it known ahead of time that we should have full access to this medicine. We have the highest rates and prevalence of diabetes. we suffer, entire families suffer the consequences of diabetes, and we think that that's a priority for our people to not be lost when that medication becomes available. There's also other ways to access the medication that became, that were told to us while we were there. This medication being available in other countries around the world means that our people maybe could go to Cuba to receive treatment there, or they could go to Costa Rica and receive treatment there. But that's going to require paving a way, probably politically, for that relationship to be made for our patients to be able to go there. So that was the other purpose of it. Also, they are willing to train our physicians if we can find a mechanism for that medication to become available for specific patients. So when it's a last resort, there's nothing else left for the patient to do in order to save a limb, maybe there's a way that we can get that medication for that specific patient through a physician who's been trained. They're willing to train physicians, they're willing to take our patients at a cost, of course, to treat them there. So there's quite a lot to look at, but the welfare of our population is really the priority.
Onkwariwa'sho.
We've been doing the health food store for about 22 years now. Any type of food, any type of supplement, I've got it. We have a very, very large selection of your wheat-free, gluten-free. We have a very large weight loss section. We have 16 feet of protein shakes. Healthy way, herbal knowledge spoken here.
Brass Horse Pizzeria and Lounge, home of the award-winning wings. Whatever your family is hungry for, Brass Horse Pizzeria can serve it up. From subs and wraps and the famous award-winning jumbo wings. Call today at 518-358-6122, pickup or delivery. If you're looking for a relaxing night out, maybe catch a game or pay-per-view fight, the Brass Horse Lounge is the place to head. Friendly faces, relaxing environment, and the patio is now open. Brass Horse Pizzeria and Lounge.
Onkwariwa'sho. Now, Chief Thompson, we're not medical professions. However, what have you found to be the most eye-opening or startling information about Herbapro P?
Well, I'll tell you, what impressed me is the before and after shots. In the stage that it was like stage 4, which is a very, very, like, I think it's the last stage of an ulcer, and having the before and after shots range from 45 days to 60 days, in some cases 90. The recovery or the scar tissue that was formed in that short amount of time was striking to me. And I'm not a medical professional, but I think that, you know, seeing the results of that in multiple slides on multiple patients, it's amazing. It's amazing.
They've been able to reduce their amputation rate by 70 to 78% in some cases. So, you know, there's debridement of a wound where some of the dead tissue is removed, and then they start receiving the injections of Herbapro, and being able to avert, you know, a full amputation of toes or an entire foot. So I thought that was really amazing. So I know that we do, one of the comments that Dr. Robinson had made was that we have wound care and our patients spend a lot of time getting the wound care done. If we could get that same healing with the medications such as Herbapro, work-wise, hours and man hours in terms of that would greatly reduce the cost of treating a patient, because it would allow that nurse who's doing all of that wound care to be able to concentrate on prevention, which is a very major part of their health care system here. And we have prevention, but theirs is much more stringent, and it's an actual pillar of their healthcare system. So I could see where it would definitely take a systems redesign in order to incorporate some of these principles that they've implemented there in Cuba, but it would save a lot of time, and we would be able to put our resources elsewhere. And I thought that was very significant.
So what are the next steps?
Next steps are visiting those organizations that I mentioned to relay to them what we found, what we saw, what we were told, what the possibilities are. The other organizations that I mentioned also have a significant political influence in Washington, D.C., and in places where we may be able to find assistance in ensuring that our people receive the treatment. Also in New York State, the governor had traveled to Cuba for, economic development reasons and so on, but also had asked about the Hebapro, the treatment. It's really getting better known around the country, and there's going to be a big conference in Cuba in December, an international conference where other countries are coming to
Including the United States.
To hear about their treatments and their medical care system.
Now, I understand you provided an information session for frontline workers with the tribe's health services. Is there going to be any more community presentations?
This Saturday at the tribal monthly meeting, we're going to be giving a presentation, a report on our trip and what we found and what we saw there.
Perfect. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I'd like to add I think it would be remiss, again, the international aspect of it at the UN in Geneva that Mad Bear built upon was a continuation of the efforts of Discahe, who was a representative of the Iroquois in the 1920s, who went to the UN in response to the 1924 and 1920 a corollary on the Canadian side with regard to citizenship, pressing for the rights of Indigenous people. That was the foundation that was laid for the later efforts of the 70s delegation that went in, that was assisted when Cuba vouched for or sponsored that delegation. So I just want to add that.
So it sounds like there's been a long historical relationship between the Iroquois and Cuba.
Well, I think Cuba comes in with Mad Bear, that visit.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the international presence was begun previously by Discahe in the 20s. So it built upon it. The foundation was there, and it was built upon.
Thank you. Anything further?
No.
Well, thank you both for joining us and for the information that you shared.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's our latest episode of Onkwariwa'sho. We're glad that you could join us. Until next time, Onagi.